3. State regulation of the economy and robbery of the occupied territories. Imperialist state regulation. The text discusses how imperialist states use economic regulation to exploit dependent countries and territories, especially those occupied during wartime. Maximum profit through exploitation. Enslavement and systematic robbery of other countries, particularly backward ones, is a key source of maximum profit for monopolists, facilitated by the imperialist state apparatus. Robbery during war. The plundering of occupied territories during war, often involving direct violence, is an integral part of economic regulation in capitalist countries and enriches large monopolies while supplying imperialist states with war resources. Nazi occupation example. The text uses the Nazi regime's occupation during World War II as an example, where plundering was central to their economic and strategic plans for world domination. Hitler's strategy. Hitler considered controlling Eastern European territories crucial for resource access, which would support Germany in its conflict with the West and eventually against the USSR. Pre-war plans. Long before attacking the USSR, the Nazis developed plans to exploit Soviet resources. In 1940, German General Thomas was ordered to prepare for resource exploitation in the USSR. Goering's directives. Goering created a specialized apparatus, the Eastern Headquarters of Economic Leadership, which issued detailed directives for plundering Soviet territories, known as Goering's Green Folder. Nazi execution. The Nazis executed these plans with extreme cruelty, systematically robbing the Soviet Union through various state and military economic bodies. Forms of robbery. The methods included confiscation and requisition of both public and private property. This encompassed weapons, gold, currency, raw materials, fuel, food, and transport equipment. Weapons seizure. In Czechoslovakia, Nazis seized weapons valued over $1.5 billion, including a complete cache from 40 Czechoslovak divisions. Resource plunder. The Nazis captured significant oil reserves in occupied Western European countries, exceeding their pre-war reserves. Industrial looting. The text highlights extensive looting of France's industrial resources, including textiles, non-ferrous metals, railway equipment, and automobiles. Economic devastation. The plundering led to economic devastation in occupied territories, with industrial equipment and raw materials being transported to Germany, severely impacting local economies. Exports from France. 1940 to 1944, the Nazis exported agricultural products worth 126.6 billion francs and industrial products worth 184.6 billion francs from France. They also exported 63 million tons of coal, 1.9 million tons of oil and fuel, 74.8 million tons of iron ore, 3.8 million tons of metallurgical products, 2.9 million tons of wheat, 2.3 million tons of oats, about 726,000 tons of potatoes, and 7.6 million hectoliters of wine to Germany. Robbery in Slavic countries. The Nazis seized industrial and commercial companies, gold reserves, and foreign currency in Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Yugoslavia. In Czechoslovakia, they captured 23,000 kilograms of gold and all state enterprises. In Poland, they confiscated state property worth £600 million and seized 230,000 enterprises and workshops. Confiscation in Yugoslavia. The Nazis confiscated large amounts of raw materials, food, and goods, liquidated the Yugoslav National Bank, and took control of industry and transport. Occupation indemnities. The Nazis imposed heavy indemnities on occupied countries to cover occupation expenses. For example, France's daily contribution increased from 300 million to 500 million francs. From 1940 to 1944, France paid Germany 631.9 billion francs. Financial exploitation in Eastern Europe. The Nazis extracted large sums from Eastern and Southeastern Europe, including £14,200,000 annually from Bohemia and Moravia and 48,818,000 dinars in fines from Yugoslavia. Total occupation payments. By August 1944, the Nazis had extracted £6,600 million from several countries, equivalent to over 90 billion marks. Occupation payments did not reflect the actual expenses for maintaining the occupation army but were based on maximizing extraction from these countries. Disguised robbery through trade. The Nazis used non-cash, clearing, payments as a form of disguised robbery, accruing debts to occupied countries that they never intended to repay. By September 1944, Germany's clearing debt to occupied countries was 35.6 billion marks, and 4 billion marks to its vassals and neutral countries like Turkey and Sweden. Seizure by German monopolies. The Nazis, with the help of major German monopolies, systematically took control of industrial, banking, transport, and other enterprises in occupied countries. These monopolies acted as agents of the Nazi regime to exploit the economies of these countries for Germany's benefit. Economic subjugation. German monopolies such as Goering, Krupp, and IG Farben industry seized major industries in countries like Czechoslovakia, Austria, and Poland. The Nazis claimed this was a return to legitimate German ownership. Differing methods. In Eastern and Southeastern Europe, the Nazis overtly seized industries. In Western Europe, they used more subtle methods like acquiring shares in companies, often under pressure from puppet governments like Vichy France. Forced syndication. In France, the Nazis pressured companies to merge and form joint ventures, such as Francolor, dominated by German interests. They also opened numerous branches of German companies in occupied countries. Domination of banking. German banks took control of local banks in occupied countries, effectively controlling significant sectors of their economies. Robbery by military personnel. The Nazis legalized looting by soldiers, fostering an environment where personal gain through theft was encouraged, contributing to Germany's war effort and enriching soldiers and officers. Pillage in the USSR. The Nazis executed extensive robbery in Soviet territories, dismantling industries and plundering agricultural resources. This included the theft of equipment, machinery, and livestock on a massive scale. Industrial exploitation. German monopolies created special companies to exploit resources in the occupied Soviet regions, setting up extensive networks to extract wealth. Strategic exploitation. Over time, as resources for direct plunder dwindled, the Nazis shifted to systematically exploiting occupied territories, adapting industries to serve Germany's war needs. Economic impact. Occupied countries like France were heavily exploited to produce military goods for Germany. This included significant orders for equipment and vehicles, benefiting German monopolies. Financial exploitation. German monopolists made substantial profits from the exploitation of occupied countries. War economy profits soared for companies like the German Chemical Trust and the Steel Trust. Budget impact. A large portion of Germany's budget during the war was funded by the robbery of occupied countries, covering significant military expenses. Human and economic cost. The Nazi occupation involved brutal methods, including terror, violence, and exploitation, revealing the predatory nature of state monopoly capitalism. This exploitation led to significant profits for German monopolists at the expense of occupied populations.